Good evening, or good afternoon, or whatever time it is in the world today. I'm Renaldo McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. This is in video and audio, and it is a summary of the class that we had on Friday, February 3rd at the Jamaica Theological Seminary via Zoom recording. It's a course that I teach at the Jamaica Theological Seminary called Caribbean Thought. This is week 4, and this is as usual, I summarize the lecture. I present the lecture is for 3 or 3.5 hours, but then I present a summary, summarizing the main arguments of the lecture and adding 1 or 2 commentaries are very important. So the question is, what is Caribbean thought and who determines this? Again, what is Caribbean thought and who determines this? Now, the class on Friday started with a brain teaser and an activity. And the first question I asked was, I currently reside in the US as a naturalized US citizen from Jamaica. Would I be considered a first-generation American? Many students got that wrong, but of course, I would not be considered a first-generation American. I would be the original. My children would be considered first generation. The second question was where most of the discussion lay, where we took up much of the time on Friday, and it was powerful because the students were fully engaged in the discussion. I asked them to come up with 1 or 2 sentences that define or defines Jamaica in relation to Caribbean. And of course, they were quite engaged. Now, the learning objectives for the class was 1, for them to critically formulate and present a concept of the Caribbean in relation to its position in history, which has given rise to its present reality. The second learning objective for them to begin to trace Caribbean through its process of coming to be, moving beyond independence and the tensions between competing political thought in Jamaica. And we're here talking about capitalism, socialism. And thirdly, for the students to begin to give critical and academic frame within which, a critical and an academic frame within which to provide commentary and contributions on current issues of society and identifying media that facilitate these expressions. Now, this lecture aims to facilitate an interdisciplinary approach to the understanding of Jamaica in relation to the Caribbean. One where the internal and personal interacts with the external. Like Keith referencing this quote, they argue that Jamaica has suffered under colonialism. Yet, they contended for a picture of Jamaica that was independent of its socioeconomic position and experience. Maybe as a way to forget the reality of its vulnerabilities so as to boost or boast about something else that gives pride and joy. Indeed, although at first the students struggled to come up with an original concept of Caribbean for themselves, they still sourced and provided a definition that gave them great pride about Jamaica, its size, its influence and popularity as a leading island in terms of its worldwide appeal and fame, from Bob Marley, Merlin Ottey, Usain Bolt, and jerk chicken. Nevertheless, the consensus was that Jamaica is still a society that's divided along class lines. This was important, as one student pointed out, that his movement from one class to the next, and by class, social class, to the next, and from the rural to the urban, has adjusted his experience and his idea about it, which changed his perspectives. This supports what Norman Gervin had written in his Reinterpretation of the Caribbean, book called Reinterpretation of the Caribbean in the Caribbean Reader, indicating that to define Caribbean is a matter of context and perspective. However, the Caribbean Reader regained their perspective begin their perspective on the Caribbean in Grenada in 1983, when Maurice Bishop and his People's Revolutionary Army met their demands. This was juxtaposed with the invasion or penetration of the US by their Navy SEALs, who provided the support that sought the local conflicts among, the peoples, that crushed the nationalist and democratic socialist intentions of the nationalists. Now, Keith and Dale Johnson wrote this book, or contributed to this book, Dependence and Underdevelopment, Latin America's Political Economy, and Keith referenced in this book the social origins of democratic socialism in Jamaica. And of course, his most recent book, Social Inequality, Economic Decline and Plutocracy, An American Crisis by Dale L. Johnson. And I referenced this book in my new book, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, where he defines the dominant class. And I lift up that same definition when we're talking about the ruling or the dominant class. Okay. But Keith and Dale Johnson, all scholars of the post-colonial milieu, write in their projects how the US penetrated the Caribbean. How the US write in their projects how the US penetrated the Caribbean through their various machineries, CIA, the US Navy SEALs, so on and so forth, so as to promote US-style ideologies. This was not free of local assistance. The penetration from without was not free of local assistance. These local assistants, these groups, they were opportunists, we call them, hoping to cash in as elites or representatives, house slaves in the local. Like Europe's strategy of trickery, making the same deals with all the African tribes, which created further chaos in Africa, which led to its plunder and domination. The penetration by supporting a few created a local tug of war. That was evident between the Manley and Seattle governments of the 1980s in Jamaica, which defined Jamaica. Nevertheless, the students agreed at the end that Jamaica has been given tremendous opportunities and investments, but has squandered it through nepotism, connectionism, and corruption. The students alluded to their own experiences, associations, studies showing Jamaica's corruption index. The NIA, the National Integrity Agency, and Dr. Trevor Monroe. And there's a film that the students will get a chance to watch in week 6, not this week coming, but the following week, looking at the cost of corruption. And of course, there's a UK report on Jamaica being on the UK radar. There's an article in the Jamaica Gleaner, I think it was sometime in 2021 or 2022, that says crooked politicians on Jamaica, crooked politicians on UK's radar, which support their conclusion, which support the students' conclusion that the country has mismanaged its investments and resources, or through corrupt means have wasted away the country's opportunities. In the end, we concluded that we are not a human race in the sense that we are racing against each other. There is no race but a human race, separating us from animals. But if we think in terms of race, then the reality of the Caribbean and the Black position within that racial thinking suggests that we lost the race of time, globalization, and colonization. This loss has created the dependent and mixed realities of the Caribbean. So if we have lost a race, yet the race is not over, since we still exist in the world, we are still part of that human race. Must we not prepare for the next event in this race so that we can become competitive? It means we can't make the same mistakes. Therefore, this project of conceptualizing the Caribbean becomes an important endeavor as an objective of this course, which we have spent most of our time doing. But of course, we will conclude with the foregoing lecture summary presentation below. What is the Caribbean? Or what is Caribbean? Past influences on the present. Novella and Keith start their book project, which is entitled The Social Origins of Democratic Socialism in Jamaica, with a working definition of Jamaica in relation to the Caribbean and the history of Black people and brown peoples of the West. According to Nelson and Nelson, or Keith and Keith, Jamaica is an island nation. I'm lifting up their words, I quote, Jamaica is an island nation, situated 90 miles to the southwest of the southernmost tip of Cuba. A former British sugar colony, it has a population of about 2.3 million people. At that time, I think now it's about 2.7. And let's continue with their definition. Like most other plantation economies, Jamaica has suffered from underdevelopment, which has led to discontent and unrest. Again, according to Keith and Keith, that is Nelson and Novella Keith, in their book, The Social Origins of Democratic Socialism in Jamaica. So earlier, I summarized class. And then, of course, I'm situating that. And then I summarized the students' interactions with the question. But then towards the end, we provided a definition from Nelson and Keith in their book, which was very powerful. Because according to Keith and Keith in the book, The Social Origins of Democratic Socialism in Jamaica, Jamaica is an island nation situated 90 miles to the southwest of the southernmost tip of Cuba. A former British sugar colony, it has a population of about 2.3 million people at the time, now 2.7. Like most other plantation economies, Jamaica has suffered from underdevelopment, which has led to discontent and unrest. Now, the Nelsons who are from Jamaica, but moved to the US and developed an interest in deconstructivist history and critical philosophy, where they re-examined their initial analysis and understanding of Jamaica and Caribbean in relation to the history and progress of the world, where the Caribbean is stagnant. Now, like many immigrants from the global south who continue to pursue academic and philosophical studies based on their negative experience of contrast, Nelson and Nelson became intrigued with the tension and struggle that created the political ideology of Jamaica, starting in the 1960s with Michael Manley. And Michael Manley is a former prime minister. They provided an initial assessment of Jamaica and their post-independent brothers and sisters as a suffering from underdevelopment, which they diagnosed as causing discontent and unrest in Jamaica and the Caribbean. In a sense, the authors provided a picture of Jamaica as being in tension and conflict, stemming from globalization. So if the problems that persist originate from the past, then Jamaica must cut itself from the duppies of the past that continues to hold them hostage. It may require a therapy that is psychological, since the trauma seems to be post-traumatic. It could be that it lingers and manifests in the abnormality of underdevelopment and discontent as a result of what Freud calls the human tendency to push unpleasant experiences to the unconscious through defense mechanisms. However, if Sigmund Freud is right, then in order to break free, it would require a fix that acknowledges the past and its effect by removing what we call blind spots in the helping process. This involves working with supports to develop a workable resolve. However, what is important in the helping experience towards healing is the process of empowerment, where those seeking help become less dependent on the therapist and more dependent or interdependent. The client must truly become committed to the process, believe in self and have hope, stick to the plan. This is important as any deviation may delay the healing process. This may provide the psychological understanding and resolve that the Caribbean needs as we approach thought, as we approach Caribbean thought. What we are and how we are and hope to be. What we are and how we are and hope to be. Therefore, if we are to embark on a psychological understanding, we may borrow from psychology as it situates the problem appropriately. The healing process involves first removing blind spots that hinder us from seeing us for who we are, or those issues that pervade and obstruct our reality. It requires revisiting the past. Nelson and Nelson did just that in their book. The definition is working as they provide an approach to Jamaica that revisits critically the socio-political context, underscoring the similar experiences that occurs in other post-colonial countries in the Caribbean. Therefore, to ask what the Caribbean is invokes a question of being as much as it is a question of tradition, culture, thinking, economics, present realities, and the consequence of true history. But it is also a question about the place and peoples of the Caribbean. It represents part of a new people, part of a new world with new people, island of paradise in the Americas with language, history, culture, religious consciousness, politics, and economies that are inherited from its mixed past. When we hear of Caribbean today, we think of beautiful islands of paradise with sun, sea, sand, cannabis, Bob Marley, and reggae music. Usain Bolt, Irie people, living out their best dreams, desires, and life. But neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty and resistance, a book that I wrote, published in 2021, challenges this motif, this prevailing idea, stating that the Caribbean is made up of dependent, vulnerable states whose beauty is divorced from its people and enjoyed mainly by those outside of it. Further, the Caribbean represents a people who have been disrupted, detached, displaced, hybridized, and made into dependent capitalist states with some level of modernity to promote consumption within the neoliberal globalized world, which is largely a consumer society. This will be continued when we come back on Friday, when we will continue with the lecture. We will go into lecture 5 on Friday. And lecture 5 on Friday, lecture 5 is what is the Caribbean, or what is Caribbean thought? We will continue. Okay? We will continue because we will say, needless to say, the Caribbean remains vulnerable and open to penetration from without and exogenous shocks from within, and is recreated within the mold and frame of its former masters since colonization and independence. It is going to be deep, and we will go even deeper. It is going to be powerful, and I have a lecture that is prepared for Friday. It's going to be for 3 hours again, but we will do a powerful presentation. I will go deeper into this lecture, wrapping up the laying of the foundation and conceptualizing the Caribbean. I will go deep. I will lift up this idea, according to Dave McGibbon, who said that they found oil they have discovered oil in Guyana. I actually wrote an article. I submitted a letter to the Gleaner responding to this discovery of oil, because in 1952 they found bauxite in Jamaica, and it was supposed to bring about some great gains, but 70 years, fast forward 70 years. What has happened with bauxite? Okay, look what's going on in Congo. They have uranium, but they are fighting over it. Okay, and I think last night in a couple of days, I was reading. I went back to read about Haiti, and Haiti have been blessed with a lot of resources. But again, the issue of penetration, but also local infighting. And we talk about the unity of the Caribbean and the people. I mean, when on next week we will get into this lecture. It promises to be provocative, It will be done in prose. It will be poetic in some way. It will be preachy because, of course, I'm from the preach. I am an ordained minister. But it will also be academic, critical, and philosophical. It will be skeptical, but it provides opportunity. But it will challenge those opportunities. And what we've done, it will be powerful. Watch the previous lecture because the students were fully engaged in that lecture. They were fully engaged. This is a summary of what happened on Friday the 3rd. Okay, on Friday the 3rd, 6 to 9. Actually, it was from 6 to 9:30. We have that on the pod. Season 6, episode 13, I believe, or 14. Season 6, episode 14. And I actually wrote something to that effect in the Neoliberal Corporation of www.neoliberal.com. All the lectures are available on the YouTube channel, on our podcast feeds, on the Audible. It's available at Renaldo. There's access to it on RenaldoCMcKenzie.com. And of course, most of it is at www.neoliberal.com. And of course, we have it available for you. But next week promises to be this Friday, powerful. On Thursday, we have Brian Concanen on the show. He's the executive director for not the international, I was saying international, but it's the Institute for Democracy, and Institute for Democracy on Haiti, the IGHD. He's the executive director. He lives here in the US. He founded this institute. We will talk about the work that he's doing to promote democracy and justice in Haiti and throughout the Caribbean. That's powerful. We will talk about this. It's part of Caribbean thinking, part of not just looking at who we are today and opportunities for the future. It's always within that. What are the opportunities for the future? But what has stopped us? We have had resources, we have had investments. Okay, so we have dogged ourselves probably. The external have dogged us, working with the internal. Okay, but therefore, how do we rise above that? How do we rise above that? That is deep. How do we rise above that? But we'll continue. This course promises to be powerful. It promises to be introspective. We're not just talking about Caribbean, but we're talking about Caribbean, and it's that, and vulnerable peoples in the world. This is the Neoliberal podcast, brought to you by the Neoliberal Corporation. And of course, in association with the Jamaica Theological Seminary. Visit them at jts.edu.jm. Visit us at www.theneoliberal.com. And of course, we are at anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support, or YouTube, The Neoliberal by Renaldo McKenzie. Please, everything we provide, check out my book. The Neoliberal is globalization, income inequality, poverty, and resistance. Is available everywhere. Type it in: hardcover, paperback, ebook, audiobook, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, iTunes, so on and so forth. It's all over Walmart, Target. Hardcover. In terms of local bookstores, they haven't gotten the picture yet, but they are catching on. They're catching on to the breakthrough of people who are on the periphery, who are now trying to come on the news. Support us, donate to the show, subscribe on all of our feeds, and of course we're at https anchor.fm/support. That's one of the ways you can donate to us. Thank you so much. Welcome.